So good morning, everyone. My name is Kristen, and on behalf of the Multiolelo team, I'd like to welcome you to our third presentation in our webinar series on expanding publishing beyond academia. Multiolelo, or MO for short, is a student-led initiative aiming to make language research findings more accessible and engaging in multiple languages through various ways of communication. Before we begin, the Multiolelo team would like to thank the Department of Second Language Studies here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa for their continuous support for the Multiolelo initiative since it was established in 2018. Now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for today's webinar session, Dr. Sin-Wang Chong. Dr. Sin-Wang Chong is an assistant professor in applied linguistics and language assessment at Queen's University Belfast, affiliated assistant professor in TESOL and academic English at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland, and a researcher at the Institute of Education, University College London. His research interests include language assessment, computer-assisted language learning, and research synthesis. He is an associate editor of 2 SSCI index journals, Innovation in Language Learning and Teaching, and Higher Education Research and Development. He is a trustee and executive committee member of British Association for Applied Linguistics, convener at Northern Ireland regional representative of British Educational Research Association's Early Career Research Network. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Sin-Wang Chong.
Thank you very much, Kristen, for the introduction. So good morning, everybody, and good evening from the UK. Thank you for the invitation to speak here with you to share a little bit about a relatively new project of mine called TESOLgraphics. And so today, what I'm going to talk about, in addition to introducing the project, is to talk about the impetus for the project from the perspective of open scholarship in TESOL and also more broadly language education. So in this hour or so, what I would like to do is to first talk a little bit about the relationship between TESOL researchers and TESOL practitioners, and also what that entails in terms of scholarship and research that we're doing. And that's kind of like a lead into the project, which I call TESOLgraphics, and I'll give you a little bit of information about the project. You may have heard of it, you may have not. It's a relatively new project that started last year in November. So I give you a little bit more information about that, and also to share with you our next phase, our next step. And of course, at the end, if you have time, and I apologize for the technical glitch, if you have questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. So here is the project team that I'm very, very proud of. Of course, I lead the project, but the project will not materialize without the help of my project team members. So I have 3 project team members who are responsible for different facets of the project. For example, Maddie here next to me is responsible for summarizing some of the infographic content. So the research papers that Maddie summarized are used to create those infographics. And the Mingsum there in the middle, she's responsible for our Twitter account, which we now have around 780 followers so far. I think that's a very, very successful progress, given the fact that we only started in January. And also we have a new member joining in as well very soon. So let's talk a little bit about TESOL research and practice. And in particular, I'm very interested in the relationship between researchers and practitioners. What do researchers see in practitioners and vice versa? I think this image here is quite revealing in the fact that researchers and practitioners do very different things, and they may not understand what each other is doing very well. For example, in this image, the penguin is talking to the researcher saying that you researchers all look alike to me. So to people who are outside of academia, researchers may look very similar. They may be They have a certain image in mind about what researchers do, what researchers like, and also how they behave. So there is a possibility that there is misunderstanding between the two parties. And in fact, in terms of the nature of the two parties, they do very, very different things, right? For example, for the practitioners, for the teachers, they're really in the classroom every day, facing challenges from their students, from parents, from schools, and they're dealing with their everyday life very seriously. On the other hand, researchers, of course, we are working very hard to conduct research, publish, and also to observe and to analyze and to present findings. So apparently, these are very, very different activities. And to some people, that the two activities are not entirely related. So that's why there may be an understanding that researchers may not really know and understand the needs of the practitioners. At the same time, the practitioners may not fully embrace what the researchers are doing. So I would like to look a little bit closer at the researcher-practitioner relationship, in particular in language education. And I'm going to share with you a number of quotes first here from some of the publications that discuss teacher-researcher relationship. So for example, here it's a quote from one of the teacher participants in a publication in 2017. The teacher said, the findings of academic research are bound to be no less misleading and unreliable than teachers' experience and intuitions. So that's a very, very blunt statement to a certain extent, that some teachers may find that research findings are irrelevant to them. Research findings are unreliable, partly because maybe that the teachers don't think the researchers understand what they are facing in their particular context, for example. Here is another quote. So another teacher, and this is from another study in 2019, focusing on a group of Chilean EFL teachers. So some of the participants said no teachers address specific empirical evidence to solve a classroom issue, and their awareness of index journals was low. So here is another statement pointing to the fact that teachers may not consult research, at least in the first instance. When they face problems, they may discuss with colleagues, they may go online and search for some resources and modify curriculum materials, but they may not be going to a journal website, for example, and look for empirical evidence to inform their practice. So that paints a rather gloomy picture. That's quite pessimistic. But if we look a little bit closer, in the same study, Sato and Low in 2019, actually revealed that practitioners care about research. They want to know more about research. So in that particular study, the teacher participants actually said that they cared about research very much because research gave them emotional support. So they kind of know that people around the world, practitioners around the world, are facing similar challenges, and they are being innovative, to overcome the challenges. For example, in this COVID era, that the notion of emergency remote teaching, teachers around the world are facing challenges, and they are innovating and being creative in every way possible. So knowing that other colleagues around the world are doing something similar serves as an emotional support to some teacher participants. The second reason why they care about research is because they are expected, at least in some contexts, to use research findings to inform their practice. So for example, from their school management, the principal or the vice principals may require teachers to have a certain degree of understanding of research findings in a particular topic. For example, in grammar teaching or vocabulary teaching. However, the teachers mentioned a number of obstacles. So they really, really wanted to know more about language education research, or ELT research. However, there are obstacles, including very practical reasons like the lack of time and resources and lack of institutional support, and also very, very limited teacher researcher collaborations. And it's very true when we think about teachers who are not always affiliated with a university. And I think people here know how expensive a journal article can be. If you go to a publisher's website, a journal website, and you click on purchase the article, it will cost quite a lot of money. So there are obstacles, but it's good to know that teachers actually care about research. They want to know more about it. How about the researchers? What is the attitude of the researchers? Do they want to talk to teachers? Do they want to understand the teachers' needs? Well, the answer, at least in Sato and Lowen's study in 2019, it's quite positive, because the researchers pointed out at the end that rather than closing the dialogue between teachers and researchers, they think that they have to widen the door and increase the amount of dialogue. And I think the key word here is dialogue. And I think it's a very important word that I will return to later, because a lot of the teacher researcher collaboration these days, they are very nice initiatives, and they're good and very useful initiatives. But the dialogic element, to me, at least in some projects, is not really there. A lot of the time, it's the researchers imparting knowledge to teachers, and teachers absorbing and trying to understand and trying to make use of the knowledge and to inform the practice, without realizing the fact that teachers also possess knowledge that researchers do not have, because teachers have that practical knowledge that researchers may not have. So it has to be a dialogue if we want to make research usable, and also help to make research usable for teachers in real life context. And in fact, in our field, researchers have been doing a lot of work to look at how to make classroom instruction, classroom language instruction effective. And there is this whole branch of instructed second language acquisition that refers to studies that look at precisely what effective teaching looks like, especially in L2 teaching. So there is a lot that has been done in instructor second language acquisition. There are journals dedicated to very practical research. For example, TESOL Quarterly, the journal that I added, Innovation in Language Learning and Teaching, focuses precisely on innovative practices in the classroom level, and many more. And of course, there is a relatively new journal called Instructor Second Language Acquisition. And there is this book on evidence-based second language pedagogy, again by Sato and Lowen. So there is a lot of attention, and there are researchers who are very, very passionate about bridging the gap between research and practice. So the whole picture is actually quite positive, because from what we said, teachers are actually quite interested in research. There are barriers, but they are interested. They would like to look at what researchers have to say. On the other hand, researchers are saying they would like a dialogue with teachers, that they would like to conduct studies that are directly relevant to the teaching context of teachers. So what's to discuss next is really not whether there is a need to interact between researchers and practitioners. A more important and relevant question should be, what should that interaction look like? And so that's why I think it's important for us to consider the nature of researcher-practitioner interactions. And that's where I would like to introduce the notion of praxis. To some people, praxis is understood as practice, which is not entirely correct. So the word praxis in its simple term, it's really looking at the interactions and the dialogic relationships between human beings and also between human beings and the environments that they are situated in. So when we think about praxis, it's not a one-way transmission of knowledge, but it's actually knowledge that is fluid and knowledge that is constantly being modified, revised, and extended and enriched through action. So there is this added dimension of knowledge that is tested and tried, that knowledge receives feedback from practitioners, knowledge being tested by reality, and so that knowledge gets revised and expanded. So this kind of reciprocal relationship between knowing things and doing things, it's the essence of praxis. So I think this is a very good summary of what praxis really means. So praxis represents a unity of theory or research and practice, wherein these inform one another and change together. So it's not how we traditionally understand that research informs practice, but practice also informs research and also provides feedback to theories that researchers theorize. So they are in unity, they are one in terms of the nature and also the progression of things. So I think essentially what we have to do is to change our mindsets as researchers. So researchers need to partner with classroom practitioners, right? And when we talk about partnering with classroom practitioners, some researchers may be thinking about, well, I have been partnering with classroom practitioners. I have been inviting teacher participants to contribute to my study, and they are my participants. So I involve teachers, I partner with teachers. But it's not just involving teachers as participants, but involve teachers as somebody who can contribute expertise and contribute their own knowledge, so that they can also get feedback from teachers, for example, about their own frameworks, about their own findings. So it's a two-way communication between researchers and practitioners. And that brings us to this another notion called open scholarship, or you may have heard of the term open science, which is a movement, a very current movement in applied linguistics. So open science, when we think about open science, you may be thinking about sharing data, making data available, making the research instruments available. Yes, they are important, but there's much more than just sharing data or sharing instruments. In open science, they talk about being open in different stages of research. So in terms of the methods, so you conduct your research, or you share the methods that you use to conduct your research openly. That's why we talked about uploading research instruments to IRIS, for example, or sharing your data on IRIS. And it's also open in terms of how you communicate your research. It's also open in terms of whether research is reproducible. So that's that leads to replication studies and its related movements. It's open in terms of evaluation, that the rigor of research can be assessed openly. That kind of relates to the openness in research methods, and also incentives to reward open research practices. And I think what attracts me the most is number two, was communicating research openly. And by communicating research openly is not just by making a journal article open access. It's more than that. It's really communicating research findings in a language that is understood by not only researchers, but also practitioners. Think about it. If you make a 7,000-word article open access, not a lot of practitioners will read it, not because they don't understand it, but because they don't have time, and also they don't know where to start. So I think we have to think about how to make research communication accessible to practitioners as well. I prefer the term open scholarship, and we actually just set up a research network at ILA with a PhD student at Cambridge University on open scholarship. So if you're interested, you can take a look at that research network. We have a webinar coming soon in June. So I prefer the word open scholarship because it's not just about research, it's also about resources or documents related to research activities, including educational resources, and also all other forms of research-related documents. So I think that's much broader and much more inclusive. That's why I prefer the term open scholarship. And I think the term scholarship implies a closer relationship between research and practice. And when you think about open scholarship, of course, you think about the initiatives that we have in applied linguistics journals. So maybe you recognize some of these badges here, pre-registered report, open data, open materials. A lot of the journals in applied linguistics have these badges to demonstrate their support towards the open scholarship movement. And of course, there are a lot of very, very successful and practical initiatives in our field, and they're very, very widely used. For example, this is something I mentioned before, IRIS, which is an online open database for researchers to upload their research instruments, their primary data, their raw data, and also for other researchers to access them. It's a very, very successful initiative. And I'm sure you may have already used it in your own study or research. And also going back to the badges, in a lot of the journals in our field, they have these registered reports, they have these replication studies, and also they encourage good practices of sharing research materials openly, for example, as online supplementary materials. So all these are very, very good initiatives to support open scholarship. And there is this another very innovative initiative that I really, really like, OASIS, Open Accessible Summaries in Language Studies. And it's also another very, very widely used resource. What they do is they ask researchers to summarize their own publication, and in a one-pager, of course, using non-technical language, so that they have a one-page summary of their article. So that for those who may not have time to read the whole article, or they may not have access to the whole article, they get the gist of the publication. So this is the one pager that I talked about. So very plain, very simple language, what this research is about, why it is important, what the researchers did, that's the methodology, what the researchers found, the findings, and things to consider. So in bullet points, very accessible to practitioners. So these are all highly successful and highly influential initiatives in open scholarship and applied linguistics. To me, they are very successful because they really open the door to teachers, and teachers are able to get a glimpse at research and research findings. However, going back to that notion of praxis, what I think is lacking is the two-way communication in this open scholarship ecosystem, so to speak. A lot of the things that we have been doing, the initiatives above, they are great, but they imply a rather unidirectional transmission of knowledge. So it's always the researchers who appear to possess quite a lot of knowledge, and such knowledge may not be accessible to practitioners, and researchers are conveying the knowledge to practitioners, and practitioners receive the knowledge to inform their own practice. But my question here is, where is the role of practitioners in this open scholarship community? Practitioners have a lot of experience, they have a different type of knowledge than researchers, and they should be given a chance to contribute to knowledge formation and knowledge creation as well. So I think this is the question that I ask. It doesn't mean I have the question, I have the answer. It doesn't mean I'm doing something marvelous that addresses this, but I think it's a question that we all have to ask. And in future initiatives, this is a question that we have to address. So essentially what I'm asking is, where is the dialogue? Does dialogue take place between researchers and practitioners in open scholarship initiatives in applied linguistics? And equally important, when we think about dialogue, in order for dialogue to take place between two groups of people, one essential feature has to be they speak the same language. If they don't speak the same language, there is no dialogue. So a number of things about effective dialogues between researchers and practitioners. So when we say dialogue, it entails two-way communications between two parties. So it's not just the researchers contributing, but also the practitioners contributing as well. And for dialogues to be effective, I think there needs to be, metaphorically speaking, a lingua franca between the two parties. So in terms of the use of language, in terms of how research findings or information is represented, there needs to be a way for both parties to understand the message. And both parties need to abandon the self-seeking mindset, I think, and develop trust. Especially, I think, in my experience with researchers, we all are very passionate about our topics, about our research areas, and I think that's excellent. I'm very passionate about assessment and the use of technology, and you can say you're very passionate about other topics, and that's great. But in the context of open scholarship, I think we really have to first listen to the needs of each other. So for researchers like us, we first have to understand what practitioners need and how my research can inform their practice. And that's my personal philosophy as an educational researcher. I mean, if you're working in other fields like philosophy, that may not be so important. But if you are working in education, for example, to me, the reason why we are doing research is to make an impact on practice. Yeah, in one way or another. And thirdly, to make dialogues effective, I think it's important that both parties share a common goal, and these goals would hopefully direct actions, collaborative actions. So I think that's very, very important. And that's something we have to consider for future open scholarship initiatives. Now, there are many things that we can do to bridge the gap between research and practice. In one of my publications, I talked about the role of research synthesis in facilitating research pedagogy dialogue. And research synthesis, or somebody would call it systematic literature review, is a type of secondary research, or some people call it desk-based research, because you can sit at a desk and you can complete your research. It has a lot of potential to me to enable this dialogic interaction between researchers and practitioners. So I would like to talk a little bit about research synthesis and secondary research. And the reason why I would like to talk about research synthesis and secondary research is it's because our project, TESOLgraphics, summarizes only research synthesis and secondary research. So we do not summarize primary studies, and I would explain the reason why in a few minutes. So what is secondary research? Secondary research, or what we call literature review, is a type of research, is a type of scholarly genre which summarizes a body of literature on a selected topic. And in terms of secondary research, we can further categorize it into traditional secondary research and systematic secondary research. Traditional secondary research is a piece of literature review, very similar to the literature review chapter that we wrote as a PhD student for our thesis. And it's aim is to really tell a story about the development of the topic or the field, and also maybe include a critique of the literature and to make suggestions for future research. So some of the examples I can think of are like a narrative review or a critical review. Those reviews would be categorized under traditional secondary research. In terms of systematic secondary research, its distinctive feature is the use of a set of method, a very systematic protocol to conduct the review process. So what's different between systematic and traditional secondary research is that systematic secondary research has a method section like a primary study. So in the method section, it details for example, the research questions, the search string, the keywords, the appraisal mechanism, and the data extraction mechanism or the data synthesis mechanism. Speaking of systematic secondary research, maybe a lot of you would think of meta-analysis, and that's a very, very popular type of systematic secondary research in applied linguistics. I've been working with Luke Plonsky on a number of projects and research synthesis, and Luke is definitely one of the leading researchers in meta-analysis. So meta-analysis is very, very popular in applied linguistics. My message here is meta-analysis is one type of systematic secondary research. There are different types of systematic secondary research. For example, qualitative research synthesis, that's another type of systematic secondary research that I'm very, very interested in. So there are different types of systematic secondary research. In fact, Luke and I wrote a paper on the typology of secondary research in applied linguistics, and we identify 13, I think, types of secondary research, including traditional and systematic. So this is not the focus of the talk, so I'm not going to go into each type, of course, but I would like to introduce this research genre. And then talking about the advantages of research synthesis or secondary research, why this project TESOLgraphics decides to focus only on secondary research, because secondary research has a lot of potential for practitioners to understand research findings. For example, this is a qualitative research synthesis that I co-authored with Higher Reinders on technology-mediated task-based language teaching. Let's have a look at the abstract. I don't want to read out the whole abstract, but just a look at the number. So in the middle of the abstract, it says the current study adopts grounded theory as a methodology to summarize qualitative findings from 16 TBLT studies published between 2002 and 2017. Simply by reading this sentence, you will understand what I mean by affordances or advantages of secondary research. Because if you read one secondary research, you get a summary of 16 primary studies. This is the case of qualitative research synthesis. If you look at an example of meta-analysis, you will get many more studies in each synthesis. And the studies were published between 2002 and 2017. So you get a glimpse at the historical development of the field as well. So it saves a lot of time. Going back to some of the teachers' concern about time and access, and I think secondary research has potential to overcome those barriers. And this is another one, a meta-analysis on second language anxiety and achievement. And if you just look at the numbers in the abstract, so this is this synthesis contains 97 reports, so 97 studies, 105 samples, independent samples from 23 countries, and over 200 effect sizes. So you can see that because of the quantitative nature, you get even more studies included in one single report. So think about from the teacher's perspective, they read one, for example, they want to know more about second language anxiety. They read this meta-analysis, they get a summary of 97 studies on the same topic. So that's quite attractive to practitioners. Another advantage of secondary research to me personally is the use of graphs and tables to present information in a very, very reader-friendly way, because syntheses have to include a lot of information. So a lot of the time you will see tables, figures, diagrams, so that researchers can make sense of the information. And here is an example. Here is a scoping review on Arabic as a heritage language. And you can see the use of a diagram to show the types of theoretical framework that inform such studies. I mean, those studies on Arabic. So it's very, very easy to see what are the theoretical frameworks available, what theoretical framework is the most commonly used. And this is also another very good example. This is a very interesting scoping review on game-based language learning, using games, digital games, to learn a second or foreign language. And this table summarizes the different types of games, the different genres of games, so and provide a definition of each genre of game and also some relevant references. So from the practitioner's perspective, this is very helpful because they could just go and pick a type of game that they are interested in, or maybe they would like to try in the classroom. They can look at related studies. So it's very, very clear, very succinct. So that's what I like about secondary research. And that's why for our project at TESOLgraphics, we decided to focus only on secondary research. So let me just now turn to our project, and I would like to give you a brief introduction of the project. So the project is called TESOLgraphics. So as the name suggests, it focuses, for now at least, secondary research related to teaching English to speakers of other languages. So our target readers are English teachers around the world. They may be ESL teachers, EFL teachers, EAL teachers, or ESOL teachers, or EAP, ESP teachers. So these teachers, if they are thinking about implementing evidence-based language teaching and learning practices, we would want them to think of our website and to be able to access some summaries of secondary research to inform their own practice. As the name also suggests, that the way we summarize information is quite different, say, from other initiatives, for example, OASIS. So we use infographics to present the summary, to make the whole message more appealing, or at least from a design or layout perspective, more attractive to English teachers. And so we summarize findings from only secondary research, and for the reasons I've already explained. And also, we would like to make sure that each summary can be read in 5 minutes, and also the summaries are relevant to teachers. And therefore, in my project team, I have, in addition to experienced researchers, actually all 4 of us have been or are English teachers. So we have that frontline experience. We understand what teachers need. And for example, Mehdi, who is currently doing the summarizing for us, he is currently an English teacher based in Iran. So he understands what teachers want to know and what kinds of information may be useful to teachers. So why this project? I think there are a number of reasons, and the primary reason, as I have shared, is to facilitate the research practice dialogue, as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, but at the same time to promote innovative evidence-based language teaching and learning, especially during COVID. This has become more and more important. Teachers around the world are looking for innovative and also evidence-based practices, especially when teaching has been shifted to online. and also to kind of harness the power and potential of data visualization. We recently set up a Twitter account, and we find it a very compatible way to disseminate our infographics. So every Friday we share an infographic, and it has been quite well received by our Twitter followers, who are mostly practitioners. And the inspiration was actually from this book that I bought, and it's an excellent book. It's called The Science of Learning, 99 Studies That Every Teacher Needs to Know. It's now in the second edition, and I think it's a very, very good book, that the authors selected 99 studies that they think are important to teachers. And what they do is they summarize the study in a way that is quite accessible to teachers. So that's actually my inspiration, that I could do something similar in TESOL for English teachers. And the aims of the project are really to promote innovative practices, and also to build a database. And we are currently building our repository of infographics. Of course, as I said, the project was launched in late November 2021. So it has only been a few months, not even half a year, but we have been receiving quite a lot of support from different universities, from different organizations, so that we are able to continue to build the database for teachers, for English teachers around the world. Of course, we have this disclaimer on our website, and I think it's quite important, because what we do is we summarize research done by other researchers, and it's very, very important for people to understand that we are not part of that original research team. So it's how we understand and interpret and select the synthesized findings. So it's very important for our users to understand this. At the same time, in terms of the rigor and the quality of the publications, we also would encourage language teachers to judge critically, for example, by looking at the methodology, looking at the journals that the article is published in, for example. So I think this is very important. Currently, we have 59 infographics. We have hired a professional graphic designer to help us produce those infographics, but the text is really what we do, and it takes quite a lot of time to read secondary research and to select important information, and to write up a summary. So I think we're doing quite well in terms of the number. So when we covered quite a diverse range of topics, from assessment to grammar instruction, intercultural communication, and different types of instruction, teaching different language skills and technology and what have you. So it's a rather broad range of topics. Without surprise, I think technology is one of the most popular areas, and it also reflects where most secondary research is conducted. And so I'm going to show you an example of our infographics. They are all in PDF format that you can all download for free. Here is a sample, and I'm going to just show you one that is on the website so that you can see the detail there. So I'm going to show you an example here. So this is our website, and I am going to let's go to technology, because I think that's popular. So you can see that these are all PDF files that you can download whenever you want. So for example, this is, let me just blow it up a little bit. Okay, so this one is on mobile assisted vocabulary learning. It's a systematic review and meta-analysis published in computer assisted language learning. So what we do in each infographic is we define the key terms in language that is understood by the teachers. So some key terms defined. What can I learn from this secondary research? So what is the focus of this secondary research? And also we would like teachers to know the evidence being summarized. So when you're reading this infographic, it's a summary of 33 primary studies published in the last decade or so on using mobile technologies to learn L2 vocabulary. So it's quite substantial. And then here it's the selected findings. Of course, we cannot include everything. We select based on our experience. And a very unique feature of our infographic is that in each PDF, we have a section called How Can I Use the Findings in My Teaching? So this is, I think, the part where the team spent most of the time thinking about the practical application of the findings. And these are by no means specific suggestions. They are not really materials that teachers can use immediately, but they are rather principles and ideas and mindsets that we hope to convey to teachers based on our own reading and reflection on the synthesized findings. So this is what you will see in each of the infographic. So this is what we have produced so far and will continue to produce. Let me just go back to the PowerPoint here. So I'm coming to a close. I'm aware of time. So in terms of future developments, what we are currently thinking, not really thinking, but we're currently waiting for approval of funding is to continue to expand the database. So we would like to continue to produce more infographics on more topics. And one of the areas that we would like to focus on is multilingualism, translanguaging, because this is a very, very vibrant field of research, bilingualism, that there are secondary research, there are secondary studies in these topics. So we're aiming to continue to expand. And at the same time, a very exciting second phase is that we are trying to co-create teaching resources with English teachers around the world. And this is where the notion of praxis, remember, that I talked about come into play, that we are not just imparting knowledge to teachers, but teachers looking at those infographics, creating with the project team immediately usable teaching resources for English teachers around the world, which will then be made freely accessible on the website as well. So this is a second phase that I'm very, very excited about because we can bring in the expertise of English teachers from around the world. So before I conclude, I would like to acknowledge the support from my two institutions, Queen's University Belfast and University of St Andrews, and also the ESRC in the UK for supporting this project. So I think that's me. And if you have any questions, you're most welcome to ask them, and I'll try my best to respond. And in terms of keeping abreast of the project updates, feel free to follow us on Twitter if you have Twitter, or you can scan the QR code here and leave a contact so that we can send you the updates and also share with you our exciting developments. Thank you very much.